Hey guys, welcome back. I have a 2013 Ford F-150 that the key shell is kind of broken. Sometimes when you start it, it breaks apart. It doesn't completely come apart, but it makes a weird popping noise. And it's just overall kind of loose. So the customer wants to replace it. And we have a couple of options. The first option we have is to replace the entire key with a whole new key and remote and everything, but that does require programming. The second option is to replace the key shell. Now, if we replace the key shell, we will have to cut the key, but since we have a key that is still good, we can duplicate that without an issue. I think that's going to be our best route on this one, but let's make sure that all the buttons work. Let's open up this remote and make sure that the circuit board is functional. So in order to replace the shell, we need a shell. This is what the shell looks like. It is a little bit different than the original design. This one, the entire back comes off and leaves everything exposed. The factory shell, let me pop it apart, how you would access the battery and show you what the difference is. So there's a little slot right there. We're gonna pop this open, take the back off. The only thing we can see is the battery. We can't access the circuit board. We can see the circuit board, but we can't get it out of here. And then sometimes this little rubber seal sticks to this face. So if that happens, just stick it back in the bottom of the shell before you snap it back together. But we need to get the circuit board out if we want to transfer it to the new shell. So in order to do that, we typically have to break them more than they already are to get that piece out. This section is glued together. So we don't want to damage the circuit board. So I'm just sliding my screwdriver along here, separating that shell, breaking that glue. Normally it's like a super glue. Holding these together. So try not to stab myself, but if we can get most of it to separate, then we should just be able to pry it apart fairly easily. Here we go. Okay, so we have the board cleaned up. I just used some rubbing alcohol and a acid brush. Just clean the stuff up. The contacts for the battery are pretty nasty, and there's pocket lint all over in here. I'm not going to worry about putting in that plastic protector on there. I don't think I could get it glued back into place. It's pretty rough shape. So let's just go ahead and put the circuit board into the key. Now this has the transponder and everything built into one unit, so we don't have to worry about transferring another chip out of the old section of the key. I even scanned this just to make sure there wasn't a transponder in there, and indeed there was not, so it is all integrated into this one circuit board. So we're going to place this into the key. Keep in mind there is a little horseshoe indentation on the top of the key right here. That is going to go where your key loop would go in at the top. And then down at the bottom is that antenna or amplifier for the transponder chip. And then make sure that the battery contacts are facing up. Now we're going to install the battery into the back of the remote here. It's kind of hard to get in there, but get that snapped into place. And then we're going to snap the back of the shell onto the key. Now, once we snap it into place, that battery will make contact with the circuit board right there. And then in the center of the battery right there. So everything will be connected, and hopefully all the functions will work on this remote, and we can just get the key cut and be good to go. So with that snap together, we should be able to set the alarm, which works. Unlock it. I can hear the doors unlocking. And we have panic. So that tells me that everything in here is functioning correctly. Now we can just cut this key, and we shouldn't have to program anything for this vehicle. So for this particular vehicle, we're going to use the customer's other key, which rarely gets used. It still has a nice, clean, sharp cut profile. And we're going to use the manual duplicator instead of the automatic cutter. So we're just going to copy this key over here and transfer over to our new key shell. Now these keys are tip-stop keys, so we need to slide this little spacer or shim at the end and push the key up against it, tighten down our clamp, and then put the new key on the right, which my hand is going to be blocking the view here, but I'm going to put that tip-stop into the jaws. We'll get the new key lined up, and then we'll make sure that our cutter is adjusted properly so we're not cutting too narrow or too deep. Now, most generally on the cut, you're going to leave it right at 0. I've checked the calibration of my machine and adjusted it several times just to make sure that it remains at 0 as the follower wears out or the cutter wears out. But really, you don't have to adjust it very often. I normally go a couple clicks just to make sure that I can hear the cutter hitting the key and then bring it back to where it's not. So now we can trace this old key and the cut will transfer exactly onto the new key. Now, if we had a key that was worn out a little bit, that's where that adjustment takes place. You can adjust it to where your cutter is going to be a little bit further away from the key to compensate for that wear. Make sure to put your safety glasses on, because when you're cutting these keys, you can get some brass shavings flying up at you. It's probably not a good thing to get in your eye. I've got them in my arms and hands before, and they are like little splinters. So we're just going to trace this along. And like I said before, I got a perfectly good camera view that is blocked by my key cutting machine once I'm actually cutting. So it wasn't very good. Now, I chose not to flip over the original key and just keep it clamped in there. Some people like to, trace the original key on both sides, or one side, and then flip the original key for the next side. I don't see the point because it's a symmetrical key, and the key's in pretty good shape that I'm copying, so we don't have to worry about it. Now that the key is cut, my Dolphin manual cutter doesn't have a deburring tool, so I just run it across some Scotch-Brite just to take any sharp edges off, smooth it out a little bit. And I find out later on that I needed to get a little more aggressive with this because it was a little stiff in the ignition. It worked great in the door, but in the ignition, sometimes it was a little bit stiff. Make sure it starts the truck. And that's that. The easiest way to fix a broken key shell on a Ford is to just replace the shell, get the new key cut, and no programming required. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.